9 out of 10 collector car buyers are pouring money into the same 5 nameplates and completely missing where the real value is hiding. While everyone fights over $80,000 Chargers, 10 other American classics, cars with factory performance credentials and genuine scarcity, are sitting under $15,000, ignored in garages and fields across the country. The window on these cars is closing fast. Collectors who figured this out 5 years ago have already doubled their money. The buyers who ignored it are the ones paying $80,000 for restoration projects. 10 cars. 10 under $15,000 opportunities. Ranked by value potential. Starting right now. Let me ask you something. When you picture a pony car from the late 1960s, what do you see? Mustang, Camaro, maybe a Firebird, maybe, if you're paying attention, a Barracuda. Nobody says Javelin. And that's exactly why you should be buying one right now. The AMC Javelin was introduced in 1968 as American Motors Corporation's answer to the Mustang, and on paper it had everything it needed to compete. Sharp styling. Genuinely sharp. Not pretty good for AMC sharp. A range of engines stretching from a sensible 232 inline-6 all the way to the fire-breathing 401 cubic inch V8 that produced enough torque to shift your spine, and a racing pedigree that most people have completely erased from memory. Here's the part that gets forgotten. The Javelin was a dominant force in SCCA Trans Am racing in the early 1970s. AMC hired Mark Donohue, one of the finest racing drivers of his generation, and the Javelin went out and beat Mustangs, beat Camaros, and won the Trans Am Championship in 1971 and 1972. Back to back. This isn't a participation trophy car. This is a car with a legitimate motorsport legacy. The 1971 redesign gave the Javelin one of the most aggressive hood scoops ever fitted to a production American car. The AMX package, a high-performance trim that added go-fast hardware and visual muscle, turned the already handsome Javelin into something that genuinely stopped traffic. And yet, a clean-running 1971 Javelin AMX can still be found for under $20,000. A Mustang Mach 1 from the same year? Try $50,000. A Camaro Z28? Don't even ask. The Javelin is the pony car that raced and won and got forgotten, which means right now it's one of the best value propositions in American muscle. That window is closing. Once buyers figure out what they've been ignoring, prices will follow. Here's a name that used to mean something. In 1963, when General Motors wanted to challenge Ford's Thunderbird personal luxury car, they didn't go to Chevrolet. They didn't go to Cadillac. They went to Buick, and they asked them to build something extraordinary. What came back was the first-generation Buick Riviera, and extraordinary doesn't begin to cover it. Designed by Bill Mitchell, the man responsible for some of the most beautiful American cars ever drawn, the 1963 to 1965 Riviera is still considered, by design historians, to be one of the finest-looking American production cars of the 20th century. Not fine for its era. Fine. Full stop. The razor-edged roofline, the hidden headlights, the long hood and short deck proportions. This car looked like nothing else on American roads, and it aged in a way that very few designs manage. Under that elegant hood sat Buick's 401 cubic inch nailhead V8, a torque monster with an unusual configuration that put the valves at the top of the combustion chamber like nails driven into a board. hence the nickname. Not the most free revving engine, but not the intention either. The Riviera was built for effortless, confident power delivery. You pressed the accelerator and the car moved, not violently, but decisively. Like a very large man who has decided to stand up, the interior was equally serious. Wide bench seating, a clean dashboard, and build quality that reflected a time when Buick genuinely meant something in terms of prestige. First-generation Rivieras in solid, driving condition can still be found in the $15,000 to $30,000 range. Clean, numbers-matching examples sit higher, but not nearly where they should be given the design pedigree and the historical significance. The collector market has been slow to recognize what serious design enthusiasts have known for decades. The 1963 Riviera is American automotive art. And art appreciates. Most people think muscle cars began with the Pontiac GTO. Some credit the Mustang for starting the movement. Both answers are partially right, but here's what almost nobody knows. Oldsmobile had a legitimate go-fast performance package called the 442 that appeared in 1964, the same year as the GTO. It wasn't inspired by the GTO. They were developed simultaneously. Oldsmobile was in this race from the beginning. The name 442 stood for 4-barrel carburetor, 4-speed manual transmission, and dual exhausts. Simple, direct, descriptive. In an era when cars had names like Tempest and Skylark, the 442 just told you what it was made of. The W30 Performance Package, introduced in 1966, turned the already capable 442 into something seriously fast. The 400 cubic inch V8 with the W30 option produced 360 horsepower at a time when manufacturers were still officially underrating power figures to keep insurance companies away. The actual output was likely higher. Quarter-mile times were genuinely impressive, sub 14 seconds in stock form, which in 1968 made you one of the fastest things on American roads. The styling across the generation is strong throughout. The 1968-1972 body, a separate platform from the earlier models, is considered the visual peak by most enthusiasts. Muscular without being grotesque, purposeful without being aggressive. This is what a muscle car is supposed to look like, and yet the 442 remains perpetually undervalued relative to comparable GTOs. 442s will often sell for 20 to 30% less. Mechanically, they're very similar. Historically, they're just as significant. The gap exists purely because Oldsmobile doesn't have the name recognition of Pontiac in modern collector circles. That's an opportunity. The 442's reputation is slowly recovering as buyers who know their history find these cars and recognize what they actually are. Get in before the wider market catches up. What if someone took a Mustang, stretched it, refined it, and aimed it at buyers who wanted performance with a side of elegance? That's the Mercury Cougar. And for 4 of the best years in its production life, 1967 through 1970, it was genuinely one of the finest personal luxury performance cars in America. Built on the Mustang platform, but with a 3-inch longer wheelbase, the Cougar offered something the Mustang couldn't. Genuine rear seat room for adults, a more substantial overall feel, and a level of interior refinement that felt less sporty and more sophisticated. The target buyer wasn't the young guy who wanted to drag race. It was the professional, who wanted to move quickly and arrive, looking like he meant it. The GTE package, introduced in 1968, put a 390 cubic inch V8 under the hood, or, for the truly committed, a 427. This was not a slow car. But even in base form with the standard 289 or 302, the Cougar had a driving character that felt considered rather than raw. It was the difference between a fighter and a duelist. The styling, particularly on the 1967 to 1968 first-generation cars, is understated and genuinely handsome. Sequential turn signals, hidden headlights, and a roofline that held together better than the Mustang Fastback in many people's estimation. This was a car that looked expensive without announcing itself. Mercury folded in 2011. That brand death sent collector values of Mercury products into a prolonged slump from which they are only now beginning to recover. The Cougar, which should by rights be valued similarly to a Mustang GT-C sets or a Mach 1 equivalent, still trades at a significant discount. That discount is temporary. Mercury is gone, but the cars remain, and eventually the market remembers that good cars are good cars regardless of badge. In 1961, Studebaker was dying. The company knew it. The industry knew it. The newspapers were already drafting the obituary. So they did what dying companies almost never do. They hired one of the world's greatest industrial designers, gave him 90 days, and asked him to create something that would save them. Raymond Loewy, the man who designed the Coca-Cola bottle, the Lucky Strike packaging, the Greyhound bus, and about 200 other things you see every day, came back in 90 days with the Studebaker Avanti. It was unlike anything on American roads. Unitized body construction when everyone else used body-on-frame. A fiberglass body when everyone else used steel. An aerodynamic shape that didn't look like anything Detroit had produced. It looked like something that had arrived from a decade that hadn't happened yet. No front grille. In 1962, when every American car had a chrome grille the size of a dining table, disc brakes, a supercharged engine option that made it one of the fastest American production cars of its era. The Avanti set speed records at the Bonneville Salt Flats in 1962 that broke 29 existing marks. A production car, breaking land speed records. Studebaker folded in 1966. But the Avanti outlived them. The design was so strong that independent companies bought the rights and continued building Avantis until 2006. The design, virtually unchanged, held up for 4 more decades. That is not a coincidence. That is what happens when a genuinely timeless shape is created. Original 1962-1964, Studebaker Avantis represent one of the most undervalued design stories in American automotive history. Prices remain relatively accessible. The history is extraordinary. The design is legitimately world-class. This is a gold mine with a Studebaker badge on it. Everyone loves the two-seat 1955 to 1957 Thunderbird. They're beautiful, they're iconic, they're correctly valued by the market. Nobody talks about what came next. The 1958 to 1960 Thunderbird, known among enthusiasts as the Square Bird for its angular, formal styling, was Ford's deliberate pivot from sports car to personal luxury machine. They added 2 rear seats, squared off the rooflines, and basically reinvented what the Thunderbird was supposed to be. At the time, it was a massive commercial success. The Square Bird outsold the original T-Bird by a factor of 4. It was exactly what the American public wanted in 1958. Big, comfortable, stylish, and powerful. But the collector market has never warmed to it the way it warmed to the original. The two-seater gets the posters, gets the magazine covers, gets the six-figure auction results. The Square Bird, equally historic, equally significant, genuinely rarer in top condition, trades at a fraction of the price. Under the hood, the 352 cubic inch V8 and later the 430 ml V8 in premium trim delivered smooth, effortless performance. The body styling, now viewed without the lens of comparison to the original, holds up surprisingly well. There's a formal elegance to the 1958 to 1960 cars that reads as genuinely distinctive rather than merely dated. The convertible versions, particularly the 1960 model with the optional stacked headlights, are legitimately beautiful cars that happen to be affordable. A clean, driving 1960 Thunderbird convertible can often be found for less than $25,000. The market is wrong about the Square Bird. It has always been wrong about the Square Bird. And markets that are wrong about undervalued assets eventually correct themselves. In 1969, Pontiac asked one question: how long can we make the hood? The answer was, very, very long. The 1969 Grand Prix was built on a shortened version of the full-size Pontiac platform, giving it a 118-inch wheelbase that allowed for the longest hood of any American production car up to that point. The proportions were deliberately, almost absurdly dramatic, and somehow it worked. The 1969 Grand Prix is one of the most visually confident American cars of its decade. This wasn't just styling for styling's sake. Pontiac paired those dramatic proportions with serious mechanical content. The standard engine was a 400 cubic inch V8. The SJ package, Pontiac's top-of-the-line Grand Prix trim, added a 428 cubic inch V8 with enough torque to make the long hood feel justified. Bucket seats, a center console, and an interior quality level that punched significantly above its price point. Motor Trend named the 1969 Grand Prix its Car of the Year. This was not a controversial choice. The automotive press was nearly unanimous. Pontiac had built something special. And then, like so many Pontiac products, the 1969-1972 Grand Prix fell through the cracks of the collector market. GTO money went to GTOs. Firebird money went to Firebirds. The Grand Prix, which was more expensive than both when new, more refined than both, and arguably more distinctive than both, got left behind. The 1969 model in particular remains one of the most stunning values in American classic car collecting. A clean, solid example can still be found in the $15,000 to $25,000 range. The SJ convertible, rarer and more desirable, sits higher, but not where it should be given the historical significance and the sheer visual drama of the car. Pontiac is gone. The cars that carry its best design work are finite. This one is underpriced and it will not stay that way. From 1955 to 1965, Chrysler produced a series of cars that carried a single-letter suffix, the 300C, the 300D, the 300E, and so on, and a single claim. They were the most powerful American production cars of their respective years. every single year. This wasn't marketing. It was accurate. The Chrysler 300-letter series used the legendary Hemi V8. The real Hemi, the original, not the modern revival, in states of tune that exceeded everything else on American roads. The 300B of 1956 produced 355 horsepower, then optionally 340 horsepower in a different configuration. In 1956, when most cars were making 150, these were not luxury cars that happened to be fast. They were purpose-built performance machines that happened to look like luxury cars. Chrysler engineers treated them as such. The suspension was tuned for high-speed stability rather than boulevard comfort. The brakes were upgraded, and the overall package was coherent in a way that American cars of the era very rarely were. The styling, handled by Virgil Exner, one of the most underappreciated designers in American automotive history, is extraordinary on the best examples. The 1955 and 1957 models in particular have a forward-thinking aggression that still reads as striking today. Fins done right, not fins done excessively. And yet the letter series sits in the shadow of the Hemi muscle cars of the 1960s in most collector conversations. The Charger gets the headlines. The Roadrunner gets the headlines. The car that created the performance Hemi tradition that proved the concept years before Dodge and Plymouth turned it into mainstream muscle, quietly depreciates relative to its historical importance. The 300-letter series is where American performance began. That story deserves a higher price. It will get one. There is a short list of American cars that design historians, serious ones at major institutions, point to as objectively enduringly beautiful. The 1961 to 1963 Lincoln Continental is on every version of that list, designed by Elwood Engel. The 1961 Continental was a radical departure from the chrome-heavy excess of late 1950s American design, where everything else was adding fins and chrome and decorative nonsense. The Continental stripped everything away. Clean, slab-sided body panels. Suicide rear doors that opened from the center, like a book. A formal roofline that converted into a four-door convertible. One of the only four-door convertibles in American production history. This was restraint as a design philosophy, and it worked because it was genuine. This wasn't minimalism as a trend. This was Engel and his team believing that a great form needed no decoration. Build quality for a luxury car was exceptional. Lincoln invested in quality control processes for the Continental that were unusually rigorous by American standards of the era. Each car was road-tested before delivery, a practice uncommon at volume manufacturers. President Kennedy was riding in a 1961 Lincoln Continental on November 22, 1963. That historical weight has given the early Continental a certain gravity that most collector cars don't carry, and yet, a clean, driving 1963 Lincoln Continental, four-door sedan or convertible, can still be found for between $15,000 and $40,000, depending on condition. A comparable Cadillac of the era often trades higher despite having a less distinguished design story. The Continental represents American design at its most confident and restrained, a combination almost never achieved in Detroit before or since. That it remains accessible is an anomaly. Anomalies correct themselves. Everything has a beginning. Every category has a first. The modern crossover SUV, the vehicle type that now accounts for more than half of all new car sales in America, has a first. And almost nobody knows what it is. It's the AMC Eagle. And it might be the most historically significant undervalued car in America. Launched in 1980, the AMC Eagle was the world's first passenger car with permanent four-wheel drive. Not a truck, not a Jeep. A car, a comfortable, family-sized, fuel-efficient passenger car with the drivetrain capability of an off-road vehicle. AMC took their existing Concorde platform, sourced Jeep four-wheel drive technology from their own parts bin, and created a category that didn't exist before they built it. Think about what that means. The RAV4 traces its philosophy to this car. The CR-V traces its philosophy to this car. The Ford Escape, the Chevrolet Equinox, every unibody four-wheel drive family vehicle on the road today. All of them are descendants of an idea that AMC introduced in 1980 when they were nearly bankrupt. The Eagle was also practical in a way that its contemporaries weren't. Comfortable interior, reasonable fuel economy for its era, an 8-inch ground clearance that allowed genuine winter and light off-road capability. It sold to doctors and professors in New England who needed to get to work when the plows hadn't run yet. It sold to ranchers who needed a family vehicle that could handle their property. It solved real problems. AMC folded in 1987. The Eagle continued briefly under Renault and then Chrysler until 1988. Then it disappeared. And because AMC disappeared, the Eagle disappeared from cultural memory with it. The result is that you can buy a clean, running AMC Eagle, the car that invented a category now worth hundreds of billions of dollars annually, for between $3,000 and $8,000, sometimes less. This isn't just an undervalued collector car. This is the founding document of modern automotive consumer culture, sitting in fields and garages across America. Available for the price of a used riding lawnmower. The Eagle's story will be told properly eventually. When it is, these prices will seem like a very strange dream. Buy one now. Not because it's a great driver's car. Because it is the proof of concept that created the world we drive in. And proof of concept in any field is priceless. 10 cars. 10 stories. 10 gold means sitting in plain sight while everyone fights over the same Mustangs and Camaros. The collector car market isn't efficient. It runs on nostalgia, on brand recognition, on what was on the poster, on someone's bedroom wall in 1975. And that creates gaps, real, exploitable gaps, between what cars are worth historically and what they cost today. Every single car on this list represents one of those gaps. The question isn't whether these cars will appreciate. They will. The question is whether you'll act while the gap still exists, or whether you'll watch it close from the outside and spend the next decade explaining to people that you almost bought one. Hit the like button if this changed how you think about the classic car market. Drop a comment below. Which one of these would you buy today, right now, if the money was already in your hand? And subscribes, because next week we're going somewhere you didn't expect. See you there.